All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rachakodash. Double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, the elders of Great Millstone who rule very well, very beautifully. Double salutations unto the Akim out here pushing this gospel in truth and in sincerity to the best of their ability given to them by Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai. Peace, blessings, and salutations be unto the elect scattered abroad. May the election of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Lord willing, fall upon your houses. This is the brother Quan Wath from the Arizona Great Millstone Camp. Come back at you, Lord will, with the edifying lesson through the spirit and power. Yahweh Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Lord will. It is edifying, Lord will. It is straight to the point. And as you see right here on the End Time headlines, it says Putin flaunts new nuke submarine to fire doomsday Poseidon torpedoes, man. And this was just recently, right? As you see, November 2nd, which I think was, yesterday or 2 days ago, right? Russia ultimately tested, and activated, right, their Poseidon torpedoes, man, which is heavy, right? Ultimately showing you that we are in a time of war, man, right? I want to grab this in Ecclesiastes 3:1 before I get into the article. It says, to everything there is a season and a time to every purpose under the heaven, right? Verse 8, dropping down to verse 8. It says, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. And see, we're not in a time of peace, right? Recently, Trump and his administration, right, ultimately tried to, tell Vladimir Zelensky, I think this was a couple days ago as well, to give up Crimea and, back to Russia and to sort of create some type of peace, right, in that area, in that region. And Vladimir Zelensky ultimately denied, right? He denied, right? There were supposed to be peace talks between Trump and Russia, and those fell through, right? Trump was talking about creating some type of peace in, the Middle East, but hey, that fell through, right? Showing you again, we're not in the time of peace, right? All these different peace deals, peace treaties, so on and so forth, they're falling through, right? And we're seeing that these nations are ultimately being stirred up. More of these nations are creating, these nuclear weapons, right? These nuclear vehicles, right? And these things are created to do what? To destroy, right? And the main target is who? It's America, man, right? So as it says right here, it says a time of war. We are in a time of war right now, especially with these new nuclear missiles, right, being created. It just shows you, right? Because the Lord's not going to have these things created, right, for no reason, right? Let's go to this real quick, and we'll get into this article. It's Isaiah 54 and verse 16. It says, behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals in the fire, which going into these, nuclear scientists and whatnot, right? Splitting these atoms, doing what they got to do to create these missiles, man, right? To create these bombs. You got the hydrogen bomb, right? China's got the hydrogen bomb. You got and they're claiming that their nuclear missile is the most powerful, right? They call it the 61, right? 60 warheads and one hydrogen bomb in one big ass fucking missile, right? And then here you are, you got Russia coming out with the Poseidon, It says, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work, and I have created the waster to destroy. So they're created to destroy, man, right? The Lord is not going to have these nuclear missiles be created, right, for no reason, right? They're created to destroy, and the main target is going to be who? It's going to be America. All right, we're going to get into this article and grab a few more precepts, right? This is, again, on End Time headlines. It says, Russia has launched the Khabarovsk, a nuclear-powered submarine designed to carry up to a dozen Poseidon nuclear drones, right? It says torpedoes capable of creating radioactive tidal waves to devastate coastal nations. And Russia, I think it was last year or the year before, right, ultimately had made a simulation, right, of one of their missiles their ICBMs being shot off, or some kind of nuclear missile being shot off about 500 miles off the coast of the UK, right? And it creating such a huge radioactive tidal wave, right, that it wiped out majority of Europe, right? And now they're saying that they have that missile, right? It's called the Poseidon. They're saying that it's stronger, and we're gonna read it, right? It's stronger than their Saramot 2 missile, right? Which is called the Satan 2 missile, which is extremely powerful nuclear missile that Russia has, right? It says a 10,000-ton vessel, part of Project 09851, right, was unveiled at the Sevmesh shipyard in Severodvinsk, 5 years behind its original 2020 schedule after construction began in 2014 at a cost exceeding £1 billion, right? It says Defense Minister Andrei Belosov oversaw the launch, stating the heavy nuclear... It says the heavy nuclear powered missile cruiser Khabrovsk is being launched from the renowned Sevmesh shipyard. Right, it says carrying underwater weapons and robotic systems, it will enable us to successfully secure Russia's maritime borders and protect its natural interests in various parts of the world's oceans. Right, and right now, America is coming up against Venezuela, right? And Venezuela is a partner, or an ally, if you will, to Russia, right? They're threatening, Maduro's threatening to use Russian missiles, right, against, American military, man, and then Russia's coming up saying, hey, if you ultimately mess with, Venezuela, right, then, hey, we're going to be swift to act. They're basically going to be left with no choice but to act, in a decisive manner, man, against America. And then here we are, right? A few days after that, now they're announcing, right, this Poseidon, right, this submarine, right, that is capable of holding multiple Poseidon UUVs, right, which UUV is ultimately going into unmanned underwater vehicle, right, which is, again, it's a nuclear capable, drone, if you will, and just one of them is extremely powerful, right? It says Navy Commander Admiral Alexander Moiseyev christened it by smashing a champagne bottle on the hull. Russia's defense ministry described the event as marking a new era of undersea deterrence, right? It says Khabrovsk, powered by a nuclear engine, can dive to 500 meters and operate for months at sea. Unlike Bory-class submarines that carry ballistic missiles, it is built for special operations and deploying Poseidon drones, each with a miniature nuclear reactor for unlimited range. So it can go anywhere, right? It says NATO calls the Poseidon Stratus 6 a weapon Vladimir Putin claims is unstoppable, right? The power of the Poseidon far exceeds that of our most advanced intercontinental ballistic missile, the Saramot, right? It says there is nothing like it anywhere else in the world. There are no means of intercepting it, man. So they're saying you're not going to be able to stop this Poseidon, man, And I was looking at it. There's really no deterrence even, set up by any of these nations, right, to stop an underwater or undersea nuclear submarine, right? There hasn't been any kind of system been set up to to deter that, so this truly is an unstoppable weapon, man. And who is it aimed at? It's aimed at America, right? It says Russia state media asserts the Poseidon can generate tsunamis to drown nations like Britain. Deputy Security Council Chief Dmitry Medvedev referred to it as the Doomsday Missile. The launch followed Poseidon tests in the Arctic's Kara Sea near NATO's northern flank, signaling nuclear brinkmanship. A second submarine, the Ulyanovsk, is under construction for the Pacific Fleet, allowing dual ocean deployment. Only rear photos of the Kavrovsk were released, highlighting secrecy and experimental design to evade Western scrutiny. Analysts view this as Russia's shift to unconventional weapons for global fear projection. Which, again, right, this is the whole point of creating this nuclear missile is to come at America, man. You know, we see what America is doing, right? China, you know, ultimately just I think it was one of the prime ministers or something like that of China basically said that, you know, America has no legitimacy, right, as being a leader of the world, right, because it supports genocide, right? It has no moral, you know, no moral value, right? They're basically shitting all over America, man, right? That shameful spewing by these different nations, man, you know, is happening, you know, consistently. So these nations are looking at America like, damn, you know, like, we don't care at all. You know, you can say whatever you want, right? Scriptures talk about that is, you know, his look shall be more stout than his fellow. Meaning, you know, as you see, you know, America basically bucking up against the rest of these nations, even their own allies, you know, bucking up hard. Well, you got two major powers, right, outside of America that are really looking at America like, you know, we don't care, you know. Which this is all leading to what, you know, the ultimate destruction, right, of America. Right, these nations getting, you know, banding together, you know, to shoot off these nuclear missiles and to destroy America, which is prophecy. Right? It's prophesied that this would ultimately take place. Right? This is Jeremiah 50. You know, one of my favorite chapters or one of my favorite verses, right, going into this, right? And I'm going to read it in the BBE, right, which is Basic Bible English version, right? In Jeremiah 50 and verse 9, it says, "For see, I am moving and sending up against Babylon," which we know Babylon today is America, right? The virgin daughter of Babylon, right, which you read in Revelations, the 18th chapter, right? It's talking about America, right? It says, "For see, I am moving and sending up against Babylon a band of great nations from the north country." That north country goes back to Russia, right? You read in Ezekiel the 38th chapter, right? The Lord Yahweh B'Shem El Shai is going to be turning, you know, Russia back into that Soviet era type mindset, right? And to ultimately, you know, get their armies ready, right? And start moving and whatnot, right? Back into that, you know, strike first, ask questions later type mentality. Right, and it even mentioned, right, some of, you know, Russia's allies, right, Persia, Libya, Ethiopia, you know, and so on and so forth, man. Right, these are these nations that are going to be allied with Russia, you know, against America, right, as well as many other nations as well, including, you know, America's allies, right. It says, and they will put their armies in position against her, right, put their armies in position against her, right. And from there she will be taken. Their arrows will be like those of an expert man of war. Not one will come back without getting its mark. You know? You read in Joel, the 2nd chapter, when these missiles get shot off, they're not going to miss. Right? It's Joel 2. And I'll start at verse 6, right? Joel 2 and 6 in the KJV, it says, "Before their face," and this is talking about the missiles, right? Let's jump up to verse 1, right? It says, "The terrible vision, right? Blow ye the trumpet in Zion," right? Which we're doing, right? Making these different video epistles, you know, going out to the highways and byways where we're blowing that trumpet, man, right? Warning you, sending out that warning, right? It says, "And sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of Yahweh B'Shem El Shai cometh. For it is nigh at hand." This is a day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness. "As the morning spread upon the mountains, a great people and a strong, there had not been ever the like, neither shall be any more after it, even to the many years, it's like even to the years of many generations, right? So, and again, this is talking about these nuclear missiles. This is not actually talking about people, you know? It's talking about nuclear missiles, right? That are ultimately going to be fought off, right? Verse 3, it says, a fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness, yea, and nothing shall escape them. So it's ultimately going to be complete and utter destruction, right? You're going to have that fire that's ultimately going to be going, behind them, propelling them to wherever they need to go. And then when they land, it's going to be what? Straight desolation, when they hit. So again, showing you this is talking about those ICBM nuclear missiles. Now let's drop down. Verse 6, it says, before their face, the people shall be much pained, and all faces shall gather blackness, right? When they see these missiles getting shot, all these people are going to be fucking scared, right? They're going to be afraid, right? Verse 7, they shall run like mighty men. They shall climb the wall like men of war, and they shall march everyone on his ways, and they shall not break their ranks, right? Meaning they're not just going to veer off, right? It's not going to be some type of, wind, right? Strong wind, right? Because, Esau's got his heart machine, right? He can control the different, the temperature. He can make it rain. He can make it, snow, so on and so forth, right? It don't matter. Esau's not going to be able to, sit here and use this machine to create some type of, fucking 185, 200 mile, winds, which is going to blow this missile off course by a few degrees, which means that instead of hitting America, it's going to hit, off the coast. No, man. Some bullshit like that. Because Esau will try to make some shit up like that, man. Right? That he's capable of doing that. But we understand, right, according to the scriptures, right, the Lord Yahweh Shem Shai is not going to have these missiles move, man. They're going to, when they get shot off, they have a path that's predestined for them, and they're going to follow that path to the capital T. Right, verse 8, it says, neither shall one thrust another, meaning they're not gonna hit each other, get too close, and boom, and then all of a sudden you got a chain reaction, all of them just start blowing the fuck up. No, man. Right, it says they shall walk everyone in this path, and when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded, meaning you're not gonna be able to stop them. Right, which is what Russia was saying. Right, you're not gonna be able to, to stop these nuclear missiles. Right, they're unstoppable. As well as other different, nuclear missiles as well, right? That Sarmat 2 missile, that's an extremely strong missile, man. Extremely strong missile, right? And Russia has that one. I think it's actually, beside the Poseidon, I think it's like the second or third strongest, nuclear missile out there. It's strong as shit, man. But again, it's just showing you, right? When they ultimately get shot off, they're not going to break their ranks. They're not going to. They have a mission, right? The Lord created these things to destroy, and that's exactly what they're going to do. And again, the main target is who? America, man. Right? Going back to Jeremiah 50 and verse 9. Actually, going to continue on to verse 10, and we're not going to read in the BBE. We're going to read verse 10 in the KJV. It says, "And Chaldea shall be a spoil. All that spoil her shall be satisfied, saith Yahweh about Shem Yahushai." Right? It says, because you were glad, because you rejoiced, O ye destroyers of mine heritage, because ye are grown fat as the heifers at grass, and bellow as bulls, your mother shall be sore confounded. She that bare you shall be ashamed. And that's ultimately going into the UK, right? Which America ultimately came from. The so-called founding fathers and whatnot, the people that came before, they came, from that. Right, from the UK, from Britain, and ultimately so-called got their independence, 1776, so on and so forth. Right, it says, "She that bare you shall be ashamed. Behold, the hindermost of the nations shall be a wilderness, a dry land, and a desert." That's what America is going to be for forever. Right, it says, "Because of the wrath of the Lord Yahweh by Shem Yahushai, it shall not be inhabited, but it shall be wholly desolate. Everyone that goeth by Babylon should be astonished and hiss at all her plagues." Right? So when people, when we flying by on a chariot after everything's said and done, right, when these nations ultimately see America be destroyed by these ICBM nuclear missiles, they're going to be like, damn, you know what I mean? they gonna do that, like Jake be doing, man, when somebody get hit or something like that, like a football game, right, gets hit, knocked out. Damn, that's how people are going to be looking at America, man. Right? While it's being destroyed and afterwards. you know, because ultimately America is going to be a memorial, right, of what the Lord Yahweh Shem Shai is going to do, right, to all those who continue to follow after wickedness, huh? You know, the Sodom and Gomorrah, the land of Sodom and Gomorrah is a memorial, today, right? That land is not inhabited anymore. The difference between America and Sodom and Gomorrah, the destruction that's going to take place, to America, right? The destruction that's going to happen in America is going to far exceed Sodom and Gomorrah. But just as Sodom and Gomorrah is a wasteland, right, not inhabited, America's going to be the same way, and that's forever, right? The land over there in Sodom and Gomorrah, right, very well could be inhabited in the future. I'm just speaking as a man, right? We don't necessarily know, what's going to happen, but nonetheless, right, America will never be inhabited anymore, right, forever, right? It says, "What put yourselves in array against Babylon, right? Round about, all ye that bend the bow, shoot at her, spare no arrows, for she hath sinned against the Lord Yahweh Shem Shai." And that's ultimately what's going to happen, man. Right? The Lord is finna destroy this place, man. Really, bros, is a good riddance, man. Because this place is evil. This place is wicked. Right? We can't wait for this place to be destroyed because this is the epicenter of evil and wickedness in the world. So we're just waiting, for that destruction, man. We see all these different nuclear missiles, right? You even got America testing nuclear missiles, man. Right? All these different nations are testing their nuclear missiles right about now, which shows you, first and foremost, we're in a time of war, and two, that ultimate war is right around the corner. And we got to constantly be throwing up the prayers, constantly be throwing up curses on this fucking place, praying that Yahweh Shem Shai bring this bitch down quick, But I got one more preset, man, and we'll close out. This is, oldie but goodie, right? Revelations 11 and 14. And it says what? It says the second woe was past. It says, and behold, the third woe cometh quicker, which is, the woe is ultimately going into, the world wars, right? World War I, World War II, World War III. Well, the second one is already passed, right? And now we're looking at the third one, right? The third woe, right? The third world war, right? Which is soon to come. And we're going to see these different nuclear missiles that are being created and tested. We're going to see those, being activated and used in these times, man. And they're going to be used mainly on America. Yeah, you're going to have other missiles, right? They're going to hit outside of America, right? Like Israel. Israel going to be destroyed. But see, Israel going to be built back up, right? America will not, So, hey, man, it's happening soon, man. But that's all I got. I just wanted to touch on that, man. Lord will, through the Spirit. It was edifying and straight to the point. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rachak, Wadash, that belongs to the elder apostles, the elder bishops of Great Millstone, the elders of Great Millstone. Till next time, I say shalom.